This is Professor Lynn Porter from Fairfield University, and this is my lecture on English Neoclassical Architecture and Decor. These are the things I'm going to talk about today. When we are in the world and what's going on in the world at this time, the basic concepts of the style and the design characteristics of the style. We're going to look at the work of Robert Adam, who's one of the major English artists at the time, and several of his structures. We're also going to look at the Thorne miniature rooms that are amazing. And then we're going to look at some major styles of furniture, including the Queen Anne, Heppelwhite, Sheraton, and Chippendale styles. The term neoclassical is a rather big term, and roughly it covers from the 1770s up until about the 1820s. And the style happened in these three main centers, in France and England, and actually in America. So we're looking at that late 1700s look. It's just that they have different names depending on which country we're in. So the Louis XVI style is neoclassical. The George III, or what's called late Georgian, is a neoclassical style in England, and the federal style in the United States is neoclassical. And I include this list of major things that are going on during this period that I think help contextualize it for us. So we have the Boston Tea Party and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So we're right at the beginning of the country called America and how America is breaking away from being a British colony. We have the first English convicts being shipped to Australia. We have the cotton gin invented and food preservation improved. Beethoven is writing his first symphony. The bicycle was invented. The Grimm brothers are writing fairy tales, right? So we have a lot of really important things going on here. And I want to point out the third from the bottom. The first iron steamship sets sail. So we're very much in the age of steam. It's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution here. In terms of the basic concepts of what we're talking about, the neoclassical is a reaction to that Rococo style, which was so gloriously fun and hedonistic, but yeah, pretty much a symptom of a society that was depraved. And so while the world is pushing back against that society, there is this return to classicism with the idea that the ancient styles are the pure styles. And we see that the Renaissance styles, which of course were based on ancient styles, are going to inform the neoclassical styles, as well as that very logical, rational thinking of the Enlightenment. And we even have a new source of inspiration, the discovery of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Remember, those were two Roman cities that were buried under lava and ash following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So those cities were captured pretty much in situ. And as those discoveries were unpacked in the late 17s and early 1800s, they became inspiration for this neoclassical style too. So all of those curved lines from the Rococo are now straightened out. The freehand natural forms are now becoming geometric. The ornamental motifs are borrowed straight from antiquity, and the ornament is controlled. Everything about neoclassical is very tightly contained. So how is this expressed in the actual designs? We're going to see very symmetrical and rational plans. We're going to see mathematical proportions that make sense, straight lines, geometrical forms, classical details. All of it sounds really familiar, doesn't it? But most of this is happening on the interiors. That's where we mostly see the neoclassical style appear. And then we're also going to have some curved walls and some niches added. So that those are Renaissance and even a little bit of that early Rococo style, but it's all a very geometrical look. So in general, we're going to see that the rooms are light in scale and color, that they're very formal, very refined and elegant. We have a lot of classical motifs, but they're in very, very low plaster relief. They're not carved deeply. They're very, very low. And then we also see these beautiful brightly colored walls and ceilings. So there is a lightness to this neoclassical look. And the major English artist of the time was Robert Adam. Hence, you hear the term Adam style it, as a stand-in for the word neoclassical. He was an architect and an interior designer and a furniture designer, and his whole idea was that by designing everything together, you got this united whole, this very harmonious feeling. Of course, he didn't do this in a vacuum. He traveled to France and Italy to see what other neoclassicists were doing. And then he also studied and measured some of the ancient buildings that are still there. And he is very much a champion of Roman architecture. But you can see that he was also striving for movement. He didn't have rules that were set out by anyone. He adjusted the proportions for the individual requirements of a room, but his work really shows up on the interiors. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to take a detailed look at Kenwood House, which is in England. And this was a house that Adams renovated. The original house included this wing over here, as well as this central house without this front portico area. And Adams also built on this wing of the house. So it's this long symmetrical house that he ended up building. These chunks over here were built after Adams, so we won't pay attention to those. And here we are looking at that central facade, and you see that portico, that porch built on. So this central area is the Adams facade. Of course, you can see the classical details with the Ionic columns holding up that triangular pediment. There's some kind of beautiful detail along that lintel line. But you see how everything feels restrained? I mean, definitely classical, but it's restrained and controlled. And here we are looking at the other side of the house. This is the back side of the house. And we can see those basic classical motifs, right? The lower level being rusticated with semicircular arches, and then a strong horizontal line above that separating it from the second and third floors with those pilasters. And looking closer at that, we realize that strong horizontal line that I pointed out. Look at that there. Look at that pattern. There's our old friend, the Greek key or the meander. And look at the pilasters. They are low relief. They're not really, really deep pilasters, but then they have that beautiful palmette design on them. We've certainly seen that before too. In this double image that I've got here, I want to point out that the left-hand side is part of that back garden facade where we see a piece of that pilaster with that palmette design. We see the wave pattern and even the central pattern here. And up here at the top, we have that long line with those rosettes, right? So all of these are very low relief. They're not deeply carved. They're only low, and but they are definitely based on motifs from ancient Rome. The right side of this image is actually from a book of drawings that Adam published. So he not only built these structures, but then he documented them in books for other people to use of what the Adam style looked like. When we go inside the house, we see how this pattern carries out too. You see the colors are very light and very pastel. That's a neoclassical thing. The white with a pastel color is a very neoclassical thing. And when we look up at this ceiling, you see that low relief of those patterns as it extends around that central image. And on the right-hand side of this image, you see the statue of the Roman boy in a niche. Those niches or niche, depends on which country you're from, those become a feature of this period too. Looking at the fireplace in that room, you see how even the fireplace itself isn't very deep. That even the mantle is just a couple inches wide. You could set, a box of matches down on top of that, but you probably couldn't even set your drink down on top of it. It's not very deep at all. So everything neoclassical is very delicate and thin. Here we are in perhaps the most famous room of the house. We're in the library now, and you see how those motifs have moved into this room too, right? I want to point out that this ceiling isn't exactly a Roman ceiling, isn't it? Yes, it's based on a compass swing, but it's not a full semicircle. It's what we call a segmented vault. It's a segment of a circle. But we have those beautiful Corinthian columns holding up that lintel. Again, the niche in the wall. We have the very light colors and the very low relief of the decoration. Looking at the room from the other end, you see how it's a symmetrical room. It has that curved end, kind of like an apse on both ends of it. Look at that fireplace on the right-hand side. It's just like that one we saw in that entrance hall. So again, it's repeating that motif. But this room is mostly about this ceiling. And there you have it, that white against those light pastel colors, kind of Easter egg colors. And the white emphasizes that very low relief of all of those beautiful decorative elements. Adam even published a drawing of what that library ceiling would look like. And one of the things I love about this drawing is the fact that the curves have been flattened out, which is why we kind of have those pie wedges at the ends. But you get this very clear sense of this very strong banding and those very strong classical motifs. Taking a closer look at that fireplace, again, everything has those same patterns, but they're all very, very low. And looking up at that cornice, oh, wow, isn't that beautiful? But you see what I mean about it being restrained, and there is a sense of holding itself back. It's not getting too rich, it's not getting too deep. There is a delicacy to this style. Look at this lintel. You see how it's got the lions facing the central vase, right? It's got rather strong animal figures in it, but even they are rendered in this very delicate fashion. And just looking up into that ceiling in those end apses, wow, you could get lost in there, couldn't you? Okay, so that's Adam's work at Kenwood House. Let's see what else he did. Let's look at Osterley Park. This is a country estate in London. And again, this was designed by Robert Adam. And look at the classical influences. You have that amazing staircase that goes up to that central platform. It looks very much like the entrance to a Greek temple, doesn't it? Actually, a Roman, because it's set up on that pedestal. You have those beautiful Ionic columns holding up that triangular pediment. So that's a very strong element from ancient Rome. And then he built what feels like a little bit like an Elizabethan prodigy house. And in fact, it was a prodigy house built during the Elizabethan period. And Queen Elizabeth I herself did indeed visit this house. But Adam was the one who put that classical portal onto the front of the building. So what we're seeing here is two very different periods kind of melded together, which isn't unusual when you think about it. If you have an amazing huge house built to the time, then 200 years later, you might very well want to do some contemporary renovations to update the old building and make it a new one. Every room has a different motif in this building, so just by looking at the dressing room, you see that it's the Etruscan dressing room. So again, we're using some of those ideas from ancient Rome. But if you remember back to the images from Pompeii, you see how these are much more contained and controlled and refined. There is a geometric breakup to these walls, but it's still very, very delicate and controlled. Of course, Mr. Adam documented everything that he did, so this is his drawing for those same designs in that Etruscan room. Just take a look at the delicacy of these items. Let's see what Mr. Adam did with Kettlestone Hall, which is another country house. Here we are at the front facade. There we have, look at that lowest level being rusticated, lifted up to that second level with that strong horizontal line. That is also that floor of the porch area, the columns, lintel, pediment. We have the sculptures on top of the pediment that feels much more Renaissance, doesn't it? But the whole thing tends to be not overly decorated. I think of the ancient Roman look as being highly decorated and the decoration being very rich and deep, whereas what we're seeing here is a very controlled look. Look at that second floor where you have those windows, each one of them with a pediment over the window. So that is a Renaissance look. So he's taking ideas both from ancient Rome and from the Renaissance and reusing them in his own very distinctive way. One of the wonderful rooms in this building is the Marble Hall, which Adam designed to make it feel like that central atrium in a Roman villa. So even though it's inside and it's got a roof, he was trying to get that sense of it. So it's this room contained by these really gorgeous marble columns holding up that lintel, going up into that curved roof. And originally the building had been designed to have windows into this room, but Adam wanted it to feel like the light was coming from overhead, like in an open air atrium. So he put in this skylight over the center of the room. But when we look down here at the walls, you see everything I've been talking about. The niches with the classical sculptures in them, the very low relief plaster detail, the light colors, this kind of pink or mauve on the lower level, and then the green moving up into the ivory ceiling. He even paid attention to the floor. You can't really see it a lot in this photograph, but the floor is made of inlaid Italian marble, and it mimics a lot of those same motifs we've been seeing. And sometimes you just got to take a closer look. There's one more motif that is very distinctive to this style. And it's right here. It's this double scroll that you've seen in just about every photograph I've shown you for this style. That double scroll is a uniquely neoclassical look. I want to show you some more neoclassical interiors, but first I need to explain the Thorne miniature rooms. Hopefully this picture gives you a clue. This woman, Mrs. Thorne, is looking into one of the rooms that she has had built. So we're literally talking about models. We're talking about these models that, this is a large one, the one that's in this photograph here. Many of the Thorne rooms are models that are like the size of a shoebox. And Mrs. Thorne made these. She's very famous in Chicago, and she came up with this idea and she designed them and she created a whole series of these Thorne rooms starting in the 1930s. She built almost 100 rooms and they're accurate in every single detail. So these rooms are actually really valuable to us who study interiors because she did her homework and she did a great job coming up with the design of these rooms that carries through centuries of European and American history. The rooms themselves are considered works of art, and many of them are at the Art Institute in Chicago. Some of them are in Phoenix, and some of them are in Knoxville. So if you're ever in one of those major cities, make a trip into the art museum. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. All of that is context for this photograph. This is an English dining room of the Georgian period, so the late 1700s. This is one of the Thorne rooms. This entire thing we're looking at here is probably the size of about two shoeboxes. So it's this tiny little detailed room. But when we stop thinking about, oh, wow, that's not a real room, that's only a model, then we can start to look at all of the neoclassical details. On the left-hand side, you have the wall with the niche in it and a classical statue. You have these classical pilasters. We have that very distinctive colored ground with the white decorative elements, that low relief of all of those details, right? So all of the details I've seen so far, here we have in this beautiful Thorne room. This is another Thorne room. This is an English entrance hall in the Georgian period, so that's the late 17th, so clearly in that style that we're talking about. So again, all of the traits that I've mentioned so far, there you go. Just fill your eyes. And this is the last Thorne room I'm going to show you for a while. So here we have an English dining room. This is based on an Adam design. Again, all of those motifs, the niches. On the right-hand side, it's interesting, the niches are actually shelves with decorative objects on them, and as opposed to a classical sculpture like we've seen in the past. Okay, speaking of decorative items, let's get to furniture. And I can definitely say that the furniture tends to be light in scale and to include classical details. Sounds familiar, right? Remember, we're talking about buildings that are fully integrated. The exterior and the interior and the furniture is all designed to work together as a unit. Remember that first building I showed you, that Adam house, that Kenwood house? Here is the furniture from the front hallway. This table with the urns on top, the side pedestals with their own vases on them, and it even extends up into a large rectangular mirror and two oval-shaped mirrors. So on the left-hand side, you see from the actual house. On the right-hand side of this image, you have the Adam design for this material. And you see that meticulous attention to detail that then, of course, carries over into the actual furniture. Here we have more furniture from Kenwood House. On the left, you have a bench that's made out of wood, but it's been painted. And when you take a close look at this bench, you see how it totally mimics the interior design of the walls and the rooms. On the right-hand side, we have this beautiful reading table or a writing table, this tripod table, and everything about it says, "I am classical." You see, even though this is a sturdy table, there's a delicacy to it. And I want to point out a motif we've seen before in this bottom band. There's that wave pattern again, or that guilloche. And there's a lightness. Look at these brackets underneath holding up that tabletop. They've been pierced, so they're very light in scale. They're light even in the sense that you can see through them. So structurally, they do their job, but there is a delicacy to them. And in this period, we also have some important furniture and design books coming out that detail the work of George Heppelwhite, Thomas Sheraton, and Thomas Chippendale. So I've just named some of the books that these designers published, But you're starting to see that this is an ongoing thing. As people are designing their interiors and designing their furniture, they're also documenting it so other people can use their designs. And these kinds of publications helped spread the style. Even before people could see the furniture, they could look at the pictures and get that sense of style. So the books themselves helped perpetuate the styles. So let's see what furniture styles we're really talking about here. First, I want to talk about the Queen Anne style. And for this, I'm going to just compare the chairs. There's a Queen Anne chairs and tables and sofas and all kinds of things. But if we just look at the chairs of all of these different styles, you'll see the defining features. So first, the Queen Anne style chair. There you go. That's the Queen Anne chair. It has these beautiful, delicate, curved lines throughout. And for the first time, we're putting a name to this kind of a leg, this cabriole leg that has that curve to it. This one has what's called a pad foot. Sometimes they resolve into a claw or a claw and ball or an animal foot. But that overall cabriole foot that has the knee that comes out down into the ankle and then down into the foot. That is the shape of a cabriole leg. We're going to see that quite a lot. I also am just pointing out that the Queen Anne style has this very distinctive curved crest rail, this kind of double curve along the top, often with a central ornament there. They always have a central splat that moves down into the top of the seat. And here we have two beautiful Queen Anne style chairs. These are actually American versions. These are in the Dallas Museum of Art. But you see all of those details. That very graceful cabriole leg. We have that curved crest rail. We have a decorative splat. You see the one on the left has a solid splat, whereas the one on the right has a pierced splat that appears to be made of bands like ribbon. Both of them highly decorated, really beautiful. And one of the things I want to point out here is often on the knee, you have an opportunity for some decoration there. So that shell on the knee is a not uncommon feature of the Queen Anne look. So let's see what Mr. Heppelwhite was up to. All of the Heppelwhite's chairs have a curved back. The drawing here is a shield-shaped back. Some of his chairs have an oval shape. Some of them are heart-shaped, but they all have a beautiful curve to the shape of the back itself. Notice the legs here. We don't have that cabriole leg. We have tapered rectangular legs. So those are kind of defining features of the Heppelwhite look. And here you go. This is a page from one of Heppelwhite's books, published in 1788. So these are six different, very distinctive, very definitely Heppelwhite chairs. All of these are the shield back versions. And they're all unique and wonderful, but they share some of the same characteristics. And of course, these are the real thing. These are Heppelwhite chairs. The left one is a shield-backed chair. The right one obviously is an oval-backed chair. Sometimes there's a heart-shaped chair too. In fact, there were heart-shaped chairs in some of those Thorne rooms that I showed you. It's like Mr. Heppelwhite decided to put all of the emphasis in his chairs into the backs as opposed to into the legs. And here you go. These are Heppelwhite chairs also, and this is what's called the heart-shaped back. I wonder what Mr. Sheraton was up to. Well, he obviously went a very different direction than Mr. Heppelwhite because he went with rectangular chair backs and tapering legs. And these are some images from a Sheraton book published right around the turn of the 1800s. And there you go. Attached to the whole chair, you have that rectangular back and the tapered legs. But even when you look at these rectangular backs, you see the strong neoclassical influence, don't you? Feels almost like these were designed by Mr. Adam, right? Here's some more Sheraton chairs. Yeah. And here you go. Here's the real thing. Sheraton is about rectangular backs and tapered legs. In fact, a lot of the legs have a tapering that includes fluting. That's those grooves built into them. And again, those harken back to classical columns, don't they? But what about Chippendale? What did Mr. Chippendale do? Mr. Chippendale kind of combines some ideas, but it's always distinctive. The top rail of the chair is always shaped kind of like a bow from a bow and arrow. It has that very distinctive swoop to it. And his legs can be either a cabriolet like that or a straight legged. All of them have some kind of a pierced splat in the center back. Here's some illustrations from a Chippendale book published in the 1750s. All of them have that bow-shaped crest rail and that pierced splat with either a straight leg or a cabriole leg. All of the ones in this photograph, or this drawing actually, are cabriole legs, but they even have decoration on the knee, don't they? And there you go. There's the real thing. Very distinctive Chippendale chairs. It's all about the shape of that top crest rail. The one on the left has a beautiful cabriole legs. And look, those are claw and ball, right? Where it's the claw of an eagle or of a lion, I'm never sure which, holding onto a ball. So that can be one of the forms that the cabriole leg takes. And then, of course, the one on the right has the straight legs. Both of these are museum quality Chippendale chairs. And I wanted to share this idea with you too, the idea of chinoiserie. So in the 17 and 1800s, there was this fascination with the Far East, with China. So designers in England and France and America came up with their own kind of ripped off versions of Chinese looking furniture. So these are Chippendale chairs, very clearly Chippendale chairs. Look at that back rail, but they are done in the style of Chinese. And that weird pseudo style is what we call chinoiserie. So there you go. Even Mr. Chippendale got into that Orientalism. And that's a lot, isn't it? So that's everything we've talked about today. Thank you for your time.